Hey guys, Back Photography here, back with another video, so welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at a really awesome photo shoot that I'm super happy with and super proud of. It's probably one of the best photo shoots I think that I've ever done, so I'm really excited to show you how it turned out. We've got a few new pieces of equipment as well to look at in this video, and a really awesome lens that I'm super excited to use and super excited to do more photo shoots with in the future. So if you're new to the channel, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you do enjoy the content you're seeing here. And now let's jump right into the photo shoot and see how we took these photos. So here we are at a rocky beach about 20 to 30 minutes away from the center of the city that we're in, and it's about 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon, which is about an hour to an hour and a half before the sun completely sets. And the reason that we decided to shoot at this time is so we can get some beautiful golden light from the sun, we can get some really nice sunsets, and we can get all of the surrounding sky to be nice and yellow and orange and warm, because we really want the shoot to be a nice warm looking shoot. And also the rocks are a nice yellowy orange color as well, so it's just going to make a beautiful orangey yellow warm light scene for some portraits. And you can see here from this GoPro footage that we have the sun behind our model here, Laura, and I'll also leave in the description a link to her Instagram if you want to check out more of her work. You can see that the light behind Laura is illuminating her hair, particularly on her right side, and that is just going to add a little bit more depth to the image, and it's also just going to make the entire image look more warm and happy and orange and yellow. So for this photo shoot we used a Sigma 50mm 1.4 lens, we also used a Sigma 35mm 1.4 art lens, and finally we used two other lenses. We used a Sigma 85mm 1.4 a little bit as well in this photo shoot, but the final lens that we used is the really exciting lens, which is the 200mm f2 by Canon, and this is a really special lens that I only just got a few days ago, so I'm really keen to test it out for this photo shoot and see how the photos turn out. We pretty much shot at the lowest aperture possible for this entire photo shoot, and that was mainly so that we could completely blur out the background and make the focus of our portrait, our model, really stand out in the foreground and add some separation between her and the background. Shooting at a low aperture also means that your light that's in the background is going to become a lot more creamy, a lot less sharp and harsh, which just means that the photo itself is going to look a lot more warm, a lot more inviting, and just a lot more of a happy vibe in general. So one of the first places we decided to shoot was just on this little rock area here, and the sun is sort of behind and to the side of Laura, because when the sun is higher in the sky you can't really put it directly behind your model, because it will mean that the contrast of the image is super low, because you're basically shooting directly into the sun. So while the sun is still quite high in the sky, you want to move your sun a little bit to the side as well as behind your model, just so they're still getting that backlight but you're not shooting directly into the sun with your camera. So here are a few photos that we took at this particular area, and then let's go and have a look at some of the other locations we shot in this photo shoot. So all of these photos were taken on a Sigma 50mm f1.4, always at f1.4 and base ISO of 100. And you can see here that the sun is so low in the sky that you can actually see some blue in the sky as well, even when shooting almost directly into the sun. And the thing with blue and orange is that they're complementary colors, so they work really well together because they are complementary or opposite on the color spectrum. And you'll see a lot of cinematography with blue and orange color schemes because it just works really well, and it makes a really nice warm and cinematic look to your photos and video. So now we're going to have a look at some of the photos I got with the 200 f2, and this is a really special lens and I was really excited to use it for this photo shoot. So the 200 f2 is renowned for having some really beautiful out of focus backgrounds and having some really nice creamy bokeh as well from that lens. And I think that shooting at f2 is really the only place that this lens should be, because that is where you're getting these really amazing photos that you really can't get out of any other lens. So the first thing I noticed when shooting with this 200mm lens is just how far back you needed to get so that you could get your entire model in frame. Normally when you're shooting portraits you might be shooting with something like a 35mm or a 50mm or an 85mm or something like that, but when you're shooting with a 200mm, because it's so telephoto and so long range, you really have to step super far back to get everything in frame. Another thing you notice when using this lens is just how heavy it is as well. This lens weighs 5.5 pounds or 2.5 kilos, and you really start to feel it after shooting someone for a little bit of time with this lens. Now it's totally worth it, and you'll see just how awesome the backgrounds are from this 200 f2, so it's totally worth it if you can put up with the weight and carrying it around for a little bit of time. I actually found it quite challenging to shoot with the 200 f2 just because I wasn't really used to having to go so far back to get everything in frame, but I had a lot of fun shooting with it, and I really like how it made the water look, particularly when I got really close down to the water with the lens. Now in this particular photo I actually got quite wet because I pretty much had to squat in the water to get the shot, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, so I think it was definitely worth doing. You can see just how blurry everything gets in the background, even when you're not looking that far into the background or that close into the foreground. Everything really just blurs out into nothing, and that is why this lens is such a popular lens and has such a cult following in the photography world. And I'm going to leave some raw files in the description of this video, so if you would like to check those out and edit along, we're going to do some editing at the end of this video, or if you just like to edit some of these photos yourself, just jump into the description, follow the link, and you'll find the raw files there. And thank you for everyone who has been editing these photos and then sending them to me on Instagram. I really do enjoy looking at them, so please send all of your edits to me on Instagram. So now let's have a look at some of the photos we did at the very end of this shoot. We'd actually packed up and pretty much got everything ready to go because the sun had pretty much gone completely behind the horizon. But then we saw that there was a really awesome photo opportunity that we would have missed, so I quickly jumped on my Canon 5D Mark IV with the 35mm lens and took a couple of quick snaps just at the end of this photo shoot, and then we wrapped it up after that. So for these last few photos, I tried to make the mood look a lot more dark, and just wanted to make a moodier looking photo compared to the other ones, which were really bright and warm and happy looking. So I think that when you're doing golden light portraits, the time where the sun has just hit the horizon, or maybe even gone just past the horizon, that is when you're going to get your moodiest photos and your photos with the most yellow warmth, especially if you're shooting with a high exposure. But if you're shooting with a lower exposure, where you're a little bit under, just like the photo we see here, we can get some really deep, dark and moody portraits. So now we're going to hop into Photoshop and do an edit on a couple of these photos. So if you haven't already, make sure to head over to the link in the description and have a download of a couple of the photos so you can edit along with me. So because we did so little editing on these photos, I decided to do 2 photos for this video. So what we're doing here is just adding some clarity to the entire image, just to make the contrast in the midtones pop. Then we're going to reduce the shadows and also drop the highlights really low, just so we can get that sky back from the background. Next thing we're going to do is just increase the exposure a little bit so we can get Laura's face nicely exposed. We're going to play with the blacks a little bit, and then we're going to add in a little bit more contrast again, just so everything looks nice and contrasty and really pops. We're going to drop the color balance a little bit bluer as well, just so we can get a nicer skin tone. And we're going to do the same thing as well with the greens, just to get a nice skin tone there. So the next thing we're going to do is just get a brush tool, and we're just going to paint in a little bit more exposure just into Laura's face, and just kind of painting around that sort of area, just so we don't get like a halo effect or anything like that, and it all looks very natural. We're also going to put in a little bit more clarity there as well, just so we don't lose any contrast in the face when we're adding more exposure, just to make all the features of Laura's face pop from the image. And now we're just going to add a little bit more again, just with a smaller brush, just adding more clarity to the areas that we want to make pop. So the eyes, the eyebrows, the nostrils, and the lips as well. So now that we've done that, we're just going to paint in some clarity into the hair and also into the hat as well. Because we did add a lot of exposure just before, we're just going to add that contrast back in by using the brush tool and adding it in manually. Okay, so now that we've done that, the next thing we're going to do is just play around with the color sliders. We're going to reduce the reds just a little bit to get a nice skin tone, just because there was a little bit too much red in the image, and then we're going to add some more blue, just so we can get those complementing colors of the blue and the orange in this photo. And that's everything we did for Camera Raw. Now let's jump into Photoshop and just finish off this image. So the first thing I noticed right off the bat is that the horizon was bent. And it's always nice to have a straight horizon in your images just so it's not distracting. So we're just going to do a crop and rotate this image a little bit, and then we're going to use the distort function in Photoshop just to pull up any of the areas that we can see black in, just so the image is nice and square again. So here I'm just going to do a content aware deletion, where Photoshop will just fill in those black areas with what it thinks is the right texture and color for those areas. And you can see that works really, really well. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, but instead of making a square selection, I'm going to use the lasso tool just to highlight the areas that I want to be filled in, and then leaving all the other areas the way they already are. So now that that is done, I'm just going to use the filter liquify tool, and what we're going to do here is basically just make Laura's hair a little bit bigger and a little bit fuller. I find that in portraits, just making the hair a little bit bigger and a little bit fuller really adds a lot to any portrait. So I'm just going to get a little brush here and just slowly pull the hair out just a little bit, just to make it look a little bit bigger. And that's before and after. So that's pretty much everything for this photo. Now let's jump over and have a look at the next photo. So here is the next photo, and as you can see, the sky is a little bit more blown out, so we're going to have to do a little bit more work to bring that back. We've just added the clarity just so we can get the image to pop a little bit more and get some more mid-tone contrast, and now we're really dropping the highlights and also the whites so we can bring back that background a little bit. And we're even dropping the exposure a little bit as well, just so we can get a little bit of that haze in the background to make everything look nice and smooth and beautiful. The next thing we're doing here is just adding some exposure and clarity to Laura's face, just because that is the main focus of this image, so we want to make that nice and bright without making it look unnatural, but we want it to be the focus of the image, so it needs to be bright so you can see everything. The next thing we're doing here is just the same thing again. We're going to add a bit of clarity to the eyes and also the eyebrows and the nostrils, and that's just so we can see Laura's features a little bit better. And here we put some on the lips, but we decided against it because we thought that it looked better without the darkness in the lips. So the next thing I did was got the brush tool again with the clarity and just added some more contrast into the hair and also into the hat. Just draws focus to Laura's face a little bit as well and directs the viewer to where they should be looking in the image. The next thing we did here was just boosting the green so you can see the moss a little bit better, and then also boosting the blues so we can get that complementary color between the orange and then the blue as well. And I just moved some of the aqua colors to be a deeper blue just because I thought it looked a little bit better. Next thing we did here is just had a bit of a play with the highlights and the exposure just until I was happy with how the background looked compared to the foreground, just so we can get the most detail out of this image as possible. So that's pretty much everything we did in Camera Raw for this photo. So here I wasn't really sure what the next step for this photo would be. It almost looks completely finished even without any retouching in Photoshop. So I had a look zoomed in and then had a look at the full image zoomed out as well, just to see if there was any improvements that I could be making in Photoshop. And there was one little thing I wanted to do, which was just going back into Camera Raw and then getting a brush tool and just making Laura's legs a little bit brighter, because I thought they looked really dark compared to the rest of her body. So just adding a little bit more exposure there just made her look a little bit more illuminated and made the lighting on her entire body look more uniform. So that was everything we did for this photo as well. So quick edits, not any crazy stuff happening here, just light changes, a few color changes, that sort of thing. So I really hope you enjoyed this photo shoot as much as I enjoyed filming it. Really enjoyed using my Canon 200mm f2 as well for this photo shoot, so you'll be seeing a little bit more about that in future videos, a few more photo shoots with it, and probably I'll do a review, like a 6-month review or something like that. So if you got to the end of this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Make sure you check out the raw files in the description of this video. Make sure to check out all the equipment that I used, which will also be in the description of this video as well. And once again, thank you very much for watching.